Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to These Go to 11. Once again, I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me as always, and this time really always, Zach Bartles. Zach, what's going on, man?
Reunited and it feels so good. Reunited and it's... I don't even know if that's the right melody. Is that the song? Is that how it goes?
I have no idea which song you're singing, so...
It's a song about two people getting back together, Nathan. It's about us.
You know, I was sitting here, I was like, man, you know, it was good that, you know, it could be all about you the week before, and, you know, I'm glad it was a little bit about me last week, but, you know, now it's all about we, Zach, and that's where the sweet spot is.
Unless the lyrics to that song get weirdly sexual, which I think they might, then that's not the sweet spot at all. Let's not talk about sweet spots or anything.
Moving on from sweet spots. Oh, man. Well, we do want to give a shout-out to Missional Wear, and, you know, let people know that they have fine products over there. And we want to highlight our These Go to 11 page because, you know, it is all about us again, Zach. And so go on Missional Wear and check out These Go to 11. You can pick up a really cool beer mug with our logo on it, or a flask, or a t-shirt, or anything else that has our logo on it that might suit your fancy. And we have Father's Day coming up too, so you can pick something up for your father or grandfather or whoever the man in your life is that you really care about.
Or Greg Dutcher, James King.
That's right. Ooh, that could be a good one. James King. Let's get stuff for James King and send it to him.
This week, the program is brought to you by our actual lack of a beef with Missional Wear. It's all in good fun. That's like the slogan of our lack of beef with Missional Wear. Dude, we had a similar thing on Gut Check with the Curmudge.
Oh,
like,
really? Oh.
I think David Regier is a friend of our the program and a good guy, and I think he didn't get that our sort of sense of humor required us to take things too far.
Right.
So, like, when we started talking trash about the coffee situation, that he was doing a coffee thing with Lagaris, at first he was, like, you know, playing along, and then when we wouldn't drop it, he, like, DM'd me. He's like, are we okay? Like, what's going on? I'm like, no, this is how we do it.
This is how we roll, man. This is how we roll.
So, yeah, Jeff, I want my freaking statues. But you know what? I realize it's a possibility he's waiting for me to drop the last eps of the Clinch podcast, which actually, sometimes when you let something go for a long time, everyone forgets about it. In this case, people are waiting with bated breath, so I think I might see if I can get a hold of a discount code or something to put on those. Nice. But yeah, I think we had said half a dozen, and so I probably still owe him one. But yeah, Missional Wear, it's probably too late for Father's Day unless you tell your dad, man, I ordered that thing from Missional Wear like 3 weeks ago and it hasn't arrived yet. But as soon as it does, you know, my old man would always like wrap a box with like a printout of the picture of the thing he had ordered that didn't get there on time. It was always one thing.
Yep.
You know, one thing where the seller dragged his feet. Do that for Dad this year. Get him These Go to 11 beer stein, even if he's no idea what These Go to 11 is.
That's right. Drag your feet, wait till the last minute, print it out Saturday night, and then wrap it up in a box and give it to him.
And then if he's confused, make like, oh my gosh, Dad, the dementia's setting in. Like, that was your favorite program. See if you can trick him into listening.
That's right. These Go to 11. Tricking listeners one person at a time. Oh, man.
Everyone wins then. We sell merch. We get more listeners. I guess just we win, now that I think about it.
Hey.
Yeah.
But it's all about the listeners.
Right. It's all about the You didn't finish. It's all about the listeners getting us sweet stuff.
That's right. It's kind of like
eventually some busts of Spurgeon and I don't even remember who the other guy was. Calvin? I think it was Calvin.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking when you said it's all about the listeners, but you forgot the last part. It's kind of like when everybody takes, you know, the you know, any number of verses out of context or like short paraphrase of it. It's like it's all about the listeners. And then we have the rest of our slogan.
Right. It's all about the listeners, which is these go to 11-19-1A. You know, whenever you see that letter in there, you're like, you're doing something fishy with that verse.
I get the little asterisk next to it. Oh, man. Well, it's good to be back on. And, Zach, you have been watching Avatar the Last Airbender. And
we've been burning through it, man.
Dude, when you finish that up, actually, my wife and I, we've been going back and going through it as well. So we are up to book 3. Which is, I think, where you are right now, too.
It is, yeah. We're just a couple eps into book 3.
Awesome.
Fire.
Awesome. So we're going to do...
Aang has hair and looks weird.
I know, right? We'll do a full, episode on that one once you're finished. But book 1 and 2, just some initial thoughts on it?
You know what? I'm gonna save the thoughts, the reaction until I've seen the whole thing. I do want to have a brief discussion about Calvin and I realized that the movie was just book 1.
Yes.
Water.
Yes.
So we didn't watch the whole thing, but it was free on Amazon Prime. So we kind of thumbed through it, looking for specific scenes and characters. And man, it was even worse than I was led to believe. It was just. And that material, first of all, it wasn't begging to be made into live action.
No.
It was the kind of material that lends itself only to animation.
Right. But
I mean, everything, dude, the moment I saw that Aang was like a white kid, I was like, what do you do? Aren't you Asian, M. Night? Why? Just horrible.
Just totally be honest with me. How annoyed were you that they kept mispronouncing his name?
Ong.
Yeah.
Ong. And then Sokka was Soka.
Yeah.
It's like, have you even seen the show, dude? And the vibe coming off of Sokka was all wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's supposed to be this sarcastic, goofy... He was like the Lance from Voltron, or the... who was the guy who was the same actor voiced him in Dragon Prince?
Oh, the Dragon Prince, yeah. Yeah,
the kind of lighthearted... I mean, they're all kind of comic relief, taking turns. Dude,
right.
And the character of Toph, the moment we met her, I said, this is someone who needs to be added to the main cast for the duration of the rest of this show. And they totally did. And dude... It
works so well.
Dude, and I remember thinking, when someone mentioned metal earlier on, I'm like, and spoiler alerts, if you haven't watched Avatar the Last Airbender, I'm like, if she can feel these vibrations, there is a earth element, to metal... Uh-huh. And it seemed from that one scene like she was like locating, I don't know if this even makes sense scientifically or geologically or whatever, but like locating kind of like the deposits of ore or something in the cage she was in.
Yeah.
And then using that to like, oh my gosh, dude, she's so like, just the raw power in this little girl character, just so cool, so fun.
Yes, absolutely. And then, as you pointed out on the discussion board, you got Rufio, who voices Zuko.
Rufio! Yes!
And it's such a great voice cast, too. I mean, so many, high-profile. Jason Isaacs voiced General or Admiral Zhao.
Mm-hmm.
Such a huge powerhouse dynamite cast in there.
And Veal for Katara? Her?
That's Mae Whitman.
Yeah. And Veal's her character from Arrested Development.
Oh, okay. Yep.
She cut her teeth. Yeah, she was on Ninja Turtles. She played April O'Neil.
Yes.
In my favorite iteration of Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
And she's on a show called Good Girls, which is kind of like a female Breaking Bad, but more lighthearted.
Yeah, it's a Netflix thing, isn't it?
No, it's on a network, but it got popular, I think, through Netflix, and then got re-upped after it got popular through Netflix. But what's funny to me is that they were able to make everyone think of her as like the most plain, boring person on earth. And then you see her acting in other things, and she's like so full of energy, and she's a whirlwind, and she's always the weird one, and and she's the very opposite of Anne.
Yes,
but Yeah, she's awesome. The whole thing's great, and we have to definitely. I've been jotting down my favorite lines.
Nice.
Aspects of the show that I think my thesis is if it keeps on the same, and it's not going to disappoint me at this point. I mean, we're the majority through it now.
Yeah.
We're kind of in the home stretch. Is that it doesn't belong in the category of like children's programming. I really don't think it does. It's from a writer's standpoint.
Yeah.
The way that it approaches its story is leaps and bounds ahead of like the Dragon Prince. I said in my Ask Me Anything, like I didn't think it was way better. That's because season 1 was laying some groundwork. Once we got partway into season 2, I was like, dang, this thing is it's really tightly written, and then it's really well executed.
Yes, tons of dramatic moments in it, and very well voice cast and acted. I love. I know we're not supposed to be talking about it, but I can't help it now.
It's our program, man. We talk about it if we want to talk about it. Let's talk about it.
I love Mako or Mako, however you pronounce it. His just the dynamic moments with Zuko and guiding him and leading him along.
So that guy died, though.
Yeah, he did.
In our first couple eps that we've watched in Fire, he hasn't said anything. Like, he's in jail and he just has his back to Zuko and he won't talk. Did you notice a difference when you first watched it and some guy named Greg takes over for the incomparable Bruce Lee peer, of I thought it was Mako.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Is it noticeable?
It is a little bit, but like he does a good job at being close enough. Mm-hmm. So you do there are occasions where you notice it, but again, I think he does a good job at being close enough that you're like, and it's okay. This works. So it's not nearly as horrible as you might think. Voice actors, they're so incredibly talented and can do so many things with their vocal cords to make them sound very similar to other people and characters.
Yeah.
So
real voice. And what's funny is I was just watching a YouTube video before I left for here to bring my kid to karate that it was about the kind of slow devolution of animation in America, with kind of the starting with some stuff before Aladdin, but really with Aladdin, where there was all Robin Williams, and then it went from like professional voice actors inhabiting these roles to, okay, what A-listers can we blow the budget on?
Yeah.
And now half the time I have a huge disconnect in my mind between, who Angelina Jolie or whoever it is that's supposed to be, and thankfully Disney's gotten back to, if you watch Coco or Tangled or even Frozen, I don't think anyone really, some of those actors who've become more well-known weren't yet.
Yeah.
And so they're moving back toward the notion of, there's this whole pool of people who can just become someone else entirely.
Yes.
When you watch the credits and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that guy was Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
And then like 19 other people that sound nothing like,
Yes.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Oh man, Jim Cummings, who voiced Winnie the Pooh. Oh, he's one of my favorite voice actors of all times. I mean, not only Winnie the Pooh, but he also did Tigger, and he was I don't know if you remember cartoon Bonkers. Just so many different characters.
Yeah, he also did Duck Dodgers.
Yep. Duck Dodgers.
Did you ever see the Comic-Con thing where he read he and one of the Powerpuff Girls did a reading from it was like the Emperor and Darth Vader.
Yes, and he was
in the Winnie the Pooh voice and stuff. It was so funny. Oh, that is just brilliant stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Oh man, it's so good. Yeah, and I think you said Duck Dodgers. I think he also did Darkwing Duck.
I think that may be what I'm thinking of.
Oh, okay.
I mean, both of them sound like
same thing. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, voice actors, just absolutely love it. I mean, the guy who, I forget his name, but the guy who voiced SpongeBob, he was Yakko Warner in Animaniacs. And, just so many faceless wonders out there.
Dude, Animaniacs, that's brilliant stuff, too. I've been showing my kid that, but you have to buy it. It's not free to stream anywhere.
Oh, it's not on Netflix anymore?
I should probably just get the DVDs, like the Gen Xer I am.
Just roll with it, man. Just roll with it.
Anyway, this has been Grown Men discussing cartoons.
Absolutely. Hey, this is amazing stuff. Now, you had something that you had texted me about, and it's a topic we are going to see how it goes. So I'm going to let you lead it off because you're like, hey, I got this thing. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm intrigued. I
said it was either brilliant or really dumb, and I still don't know. Here's the background to what prompted this thought in me.
Okay.
My wife and I wanted to have a little cigar together before she's on her way. She's at a country club right now, presenting something about her novel, We Hope for Better Things, which is doing far, far, far better than any of my novels ever did, which makes me happy and jealous.
Nice.
So we wanted to just have and I opened the humidor, and there was like one cigar in it. I said, let's go get a few. But we didn't have much time. Mm-hmm. And so we went to a place with a cowboy-themed name. I'm not going to give them a free promo here. And we won't accept a sponsorship from them. Because it's the kind of place that you walk in, and there's a full walk-in humidor, but before that is just like the saddest corridor of other crap. And I said, we probably don't have time to go to the Downtown Smoking Club, which is a really nice place in downtown Lansing, just down from the Capitol building. I said, so I guess we're going to head over to the old Bong and Vape. And she started laughing her butt off, and I was like, oh, that's what it's called from now on. It's the Bong and Vape. Because it's like all bongs right at first, and then there's a whole row behind the counter of like the vape juice. You know what I'm talking about? The little different flavors and crap. And then you can go from there into a pretty decently stocked humidor. But like it's the kind of place we would never, ever darken the doors of, but for the fact that it's 2 blocks from our house and it's super convenient. I can walk there in 5 minutes. I can drive there in 1. And I was on the way home, I was just thinking about like the fact that I so frequently go into a place like that, which I'm sure eventually, now that we've got like the legal pot here, is going to start selling crap that makes me go, okay, I can't go here anymore.
Right.
But the fact that if I would have told, if I went back and told like 20-year-old Zach that he frequently went to a place to buy cigars that prominently sold like glassware, and then explained what vaping was and the kind of D-bags who do it, he'd probably beat me up, and I'd be powerless to stop him because he's more powerful than me. And I'm thinking like, is there some connection? Just a basic human thing deep in the soul, some connection to be made to our cultures, especially the church's kind of consumption of not great spiritual stuff because of convenience. And I know so many people who I talk to them about, reading the scriptures, reading spiritual stuff, doing, devotional reading and that kind of thing. And it seems like we are at the point, I mean, in the past, at least you had to get in your car and go to a Lifeway or a Zondervan family store or a family Christian store, as it became that, and walk around. You weren't going to get anything good. That was still convenient. And you probably, unless you happen to know who you were looking for, you might get some John Piper, you might get something good, but right. Probably what they had, on the end caps was going to be some Joyce Meyer junk or something like that. Best case scenario, walk out with something by Beth Moore,
right?
And you profit from it.
Yep.
So like now you don't even have that. Those are all gone. And I know people who are like, well, whatever, I open my phone and whatever is the thing on, YouVersion, I just read that.
Yeah.
Or whatever's on this, or, I know people who, I do Joseph Prince's studies. They get emailed to me. And I'm like, that dude's a straight heretic. Like, right. Yeah, I like him and it's easy. And the notion that it's almost this kind of the spiritual equivalent of popping down to the bong and vape and just because it's easy,
right?
Even though it's not the best,
right?
And once in a while, I put one of those cigars in my mouth if it hasn't been truly cellophane shut, and I swear I taste like the residue from like the vape garbage on it.
Yeah.
And it's just they're not quite humidified correctly. They're always they're not crunchy. They're over humidified, so you get a little. You're like, is this plume or is this a little bit of mold, or what am I dealing with here? And it's a bad situation, but it's easy.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about just even people who are like, I'm a Christian, I walk with Jesus, I'm trying to grow. It seems like it's just a foregone conclusion that doing the easiest thing and, following the easiest way and feeding on the most convenient materials is, and it's crazy because in this day and age, it's almost as convenient to search out the good stuff. You can still get it on your phone if you go to CCEL or one of these other places.
Right.
But what do you think? Is there anything here, or is this a tenuous connection?
Well,
at best?
I think you're right. I think there is something. For the longest time, I've had a saying that American culture is in everything. It's the Burger King culture, your way, right away, and it's wanting not only things to be convenient, but wanting them to be easy too. And there is. When you start getting into deeper, true doctrine and theology in God's Word, it does bend your mind, and it does cause you to have to reevaluate your life. It does cause you to have to, truly think about sanctification. It does, truly have to think, cause you to think about the holiness of God and the implications of that in my life. But who wants to do that? I mean, I've got millions of shows on Netflix. I've got 400 cable channels. I've got Hulu. I've got Amazon Prime, and so it's better. I'll wake up in the morning and I'll open Our Daily Bread and get my 10-minute quick fix and move on. And I'm not saying that judgmentally, because I know that I've been guilty of that too. That there are times where it's like, I'm just, I'm gonna get my breakfast on the go, I'm gonna get my devotional on the go, and I'm gonna go. Instead of, truly taking the time to really seek out God and dive into His Word. And
which, that's better than nothing, right? Saying I'm going to start my day by in any way focusing on God's Word and praying that He'll guide me through the day. It's certainly better, but if that's the extent of it, right. And I was going to say before you even brought up Our Daily Bread, that kind of pokes a hole in my theory because, going back way before streaming or any of this convenience we have now,
yeah.
That was all like when I was in Bible college in the mid '90s.
Yeah,
that was derisively called Our Daily Crouton by some of our profs, because it's it's a story it's extra biblical illustrative story.
Yeah,
and then a verse and then a few little thoughts on it, which is again it's if it's a little moment and if it's going from nothing to that, great.
Right,
but we don't want to stay at that forever. So right. The convenience. But I compare that with a story that I heard. When I worked for Family Christian Store at the corporate office, we had Lee Strobel come in, and he was talking about his coming to faith from being an atheist.
Yep.
And he was talking about how he went to he was still a convinced atheist. He was just starting to look into this stuff, and he went to a Christian bookstore. Mm-hmm. And he just explained, I'm just looking for a primer. I'm looking for something basic. And the guy who went in, I think it was just like a mom and pop, the kind of, it's probably Frank Turk and his wife. I think they ran this store. or a different one. But the guy said, I know exactly what you want. And he pulled out Mere Christianity by Clive. Mm-hmm. And he said, read this. I can tell you're kind of an intellectual. This will scratch your itch and it'll answer some of your questions. And, come back and let me know. And he said, well, do you have a paper bag, like a paper bag with no logo on it? Because I don't want to walk out of here and walk around this mall and people know that I've, got a Christian book. I'm right. Embarrassed by that. And the guy's like, no, I'm sorry. It'll probably fit in your coat pocket. And he said, okay, no problem. And he took it. So he came back like 3 months later. and the guy had special ordered 4 or 5 other books that he thought might be helpful to him and put them on the shelf, and he said, here they are. And then when he went and bought a couple of them, the guy pulled out a plain brown paper sack and put them in because it was full on like ministry, which I've seen. I used to work in the retail setting, and I've seen it go well.
Yeah.
When people actually seek out what they need, whether you're doing it online or in one of these stores that sadly are no more, or one of these mom and pop ones that's still hanging on, and it can go really well. But the most convenient version would have been for him to walk in, look at the planogrammed, bestseller section or end cap or whatever, grab some garbage, with just man-centered nonsense, saccharine theology, go home, read it, and go, this is stupid, and write the whole thing off. So, I don't know, how do we, in an age where we're beyond, the ability to actually engage a seeker or a non-believer on that level in a bookstore setting, how do we regain, capture that and say we'll still put in the work to figure out, what's best for feeding my soul, what's going to stretch me a little bit, what's going to not just be the easiest thing, not just pop open my phone and say, oh, here's the next one. And again, it's probably better than nothing.
Right.
But it's such a cavalier approach to things because there's a glut of options.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people just don't know what's good and what's not.
Yeah.
And even with the bookstore, again, I had a guy who taught Sunday school at my church, and he said, your preaching has made me reassess how I did this. I used to just go into the bookstore and just kind of flip through and be like, oh, here's a study that's kind of thin for our class with some discussion questions. I'll just get this many copies of it and go. And now I buy one copy of 7 or 8 and really spend some time and decide which one's best.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how we get people to re-engage with taking the time in a culture where we don't feel like we have the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, going back to one of the things you said, the story about Lee Strobel, it actually brought to mind, what you were saying, and thinking about Evan David, the guy that we had on who, wrote the book on atheism. And I remember, when we were talking to him about some of the research he did, and he's like, oh yeah, well, Rick Warren and Brian McLaren and you and I, like, if we had been in the same room, we would have looked at each other and been like, are you crazy? And you didn't say that on air, but you did say, yeah, but I wouldn't necessarily consider those guys. I mean, certainly not Brian McLaren, but Rick Warren. I wouldn't really consider them a strong source to be using in your research. And so there is so much more out there, somebody just walking in. But I think from the perspective of the Christian community, which is more what we're talking about now, I think that's indicative of the church culture that they're in and their pastor. I know that our church really strives to make recommendations to the congregation of solid biblical books that people should be reading and checking out. So if you're looking for something to read, go here, look at this, do if you're looking to do something in a Bible study to supplement, maybe you're in between books or whatever, check out this resource. And so there's really an emphasis on putting good material into people's hands, John Piper, Tim Keller, all these people who, Matt Chandler, all these people who we would consider, these are strong theologically based teachers. That's who we want you to be looking at. That's who we want you to be reading. And a lot of the other stuff, I mean, Greg is quite frank, like, don't waste your money on it, and if you can, And it's not that he's opposed to people, reading those things, but it's like literally, I think you're going to be wasting your money if you do this. And so if you can get a free copy or go to the library and get it, sure, go ahead and do that. But, don't go out and spend the money on this. Rather, spend your money on this instead. And so I think that has a lot to do with it, that if the pastor is along those same lines in the church where, he's not going biblically deep and it's all surface level and it's all easy and it's all convenient, then that's going to breed a culture in the church that is very similar. Or if the pastor is biblically going deep and is stronger but not watching out for his congregation and making recommendations that are going to help them grow in their faith, then everything and anything is going to be up for grabs.
I try and put things in our church library. I feature certain things on kind of a shelf that faces out. You face several books, and then we've got some of those little book stands amidst all the tons and tons of spines.
Yep.
And our church library is also a gathering place where we, eat the cookies and drink the coffee every Sunday and everything.
Right.
And I always am frustrated at how few people ever take advantage. I mean, we get a new influx of books from Brazos, Baker Academic, Baker, and Revell every 3 months because my wife gets all these tons of them for free because she works there, and a bunch more for free because she's one of their authors.
Right.
And so, we're reaping all these benefits, and then people at the same time, again, they'll pop something up on the phone, and I think that probably it's a better situation in my church because people have become more discerning over the past few years, but still, it's so easy. And when you were talking about, emphasizing the good stuff from the pulpit or in a newsletter or whatever, I was thinking something I had overlooked was the notion of the church bookstore. Like, for example, I listen to Alistair Begg, and he almost always will say over the course of a sermon, oh yeah, you can pick that up in our bookstore.
Yeah.
It's a good one. You should read it. And they can make sure that it only contains stuff that is going to not be offensive to good doctrine.
Right.
That is going to be building up. And, I mean, that's something I think only a much larger church could do.
Oh, yeah.
Even a church of, say, 800, 1,000, 1,200 might struggle to... I mean, you could keep it going on Sunday between when service ends and an hour later or something, but to have a bookshop right there... Even a church the size of like Kevin DeYoung's old church here in town, University Reformed, I had always thought it would be cool if they had a bookstore that was open a couple days a week. When I was, young, restless, Reformed Zach, 13, 14 years ago.
Right.
And wanting to kind of build that part of me and read more of the stuff I hadn't. And they never went that route. The only churches around here in my area that I know of that are big enough to sustain a bookstore are going to have the same sort of lowest common denominator stuff, I fear, that most Christian bookstores had in the front on the end caps and on the featured tables.
Yeah.
You guys don't have a bookstore, do you?
We don't. No, we had. We actually didn't even have a library for the longest time because our building was so small. We just had what was called the pastor's bookshelf. And so usually once a quarter, they would cycle through new books. And so what they would do is they would get books pretty much at cost, and they had a little donation thing. So really, I mean, members of the church could just go and take books. They didn't even necessarily have to put anything in there. But it was more just to help cover the cost of those things. And so once a quarter, there would be a new rotation on the pastor's shelves of things that they had been reading and studying that they thought were of higher quality to get into the congregation's hands.
It's a cool idea.
Yeah, it's
But you have a library now. It sounds like.
No, because since moving buildings, we actually. This is going to sound ridiculous. We're in a bigger building, but we actually don't have the space for it.
Now, do you have a large coffee shop?
No, not a large coffee shop. Like we have a table that the coffee sits on. So even in that, like we haven't expanded, the our coffee area tremendously.
Get your priorities in order, man. Come on.
I know, right? You'll have to harass Dutcher about that when he's on next week.
Now, here's a question. Is Dutcher's office so huge and sprawling that you could cut it in half and make half of it a pretty good-sized library?
No, absolutely not. But he does have 3 or 4 floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that's stocked. So people can always go down to his office, and he's more than willing to let people borrow books and make recommendations and pass books out to people. So, I mean, I guess in a sense there is, a library in the church that is Dutcher's office.
I've got a stamp in every book of mine, Ex Libris, Zachary Bartles, and if people borrow them, I write their name and the name of the book in my Palm Pilot, and I say to them, if you don't return this, you're going to get diarrhea until you return it. So, and I know that people don't think I have magical powers, but, if you get inside someone's head enough, there can be a psychosomatic kind of reaction, I think.
That's right.
It's funny with me. Books are so important. And there'll be a book on my shelf I haven't read in 12 years, and maybe I'm never going to read it again, but I'm loath to loan it out. I don't know why. There's something about having it there.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but that's something I'm glad I lived during the era that valued books.
Yes.
Before the kind of full democratization of information, where now there's no real separation between somebody's live stream of their makeup tips and somebody's whole life being poured into a project.
Yeah.
It's all sort of lost in the noise.
Yeah. All this talk of books, Zach, it's actually, it's been maybe close to a year before since we've done a good book review here. So maybe that's something that we should look to go ahead and do on the podcast. Make some book recommendations.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think you and I both mentioned what we were reading at the moment in our Ask Me Anythings, right?
No, actually, I didn't get that question.
Oh.
So.
And you got more questions than me, so
yeah.
I take that as a little bit of a slight by the listening. But then again, I gave people like 3 hours.
Right.
And I posted about yours like
48 hours in advance.
But still, come on.
Well, and in all fairness, you had 3 of the questions, so...
I had what?
You posted 3 of the questions to me.
Oh, right. I'm like, let me grease this thing. I'm going to get it going. And then I was like, well, I wish I hadn't. And what was the thing? You missed a point on one of my things. I was asking, in a complete fantasy scenario in which you couldn't be sued or fired, or thought ill of, what would be the punishments for these particular... and I think you knew that, and you were like, I can't go there, so I'm just going to say what we do.
Yeah.
Like the same thing, if you asked me what would be my fantasy for punishing people whose phones go off during a sermon. I can't say that out loud.
Right. I have to show some restraint.
Well, all right, so what are you reading right now, Nathan?
I am actually in the process of reading Andy Stanley's Deep and Wide. And I just heard the sound of 100 listeners groaning over, over the internet there. But here's why. So when Greg went on sabbatical, he started looking at different pastors in terms of public speaking and the way that they were carrying themselves on stage. And I think we talked about that actually when he came back, and he had just been doing a lot of research and just different ways of particularly communication. And so he had started more so looking into just the way Andy Stanley carries himself on stage and his stage presence and things like that from behind the pulpit or the podium, whatever he has now, or the table or the chair, whatever it is. And so he had been, while on sabbatical, reading some of the stuff that he wrote, and he, read Deep and Wide. And he was like, I want to give this to you to read because I think it's fascinating. He's like, I don't agree with everything in there, but some of his concepts and some of the things that he says I really like and want to get your thoughts on it. So So I've been kind of going through that, and the first half is actually really interesting, or not the first half, but the first few chapters are interesting because it's more about his family, his history, and how the church got to where it was. So that's been a really interesting piece of it, and I'm slowly working my way through that because school winding down and all that. So I'm still kind of in the history portion of all that stuff. So that is actually the most current thing that I'm reading right now. So
I can't wait to talk to Dutcher about that a week from now. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to be kind, man.
Well, actually,
it's be brutal.
It's funny because we were having breakfast about 2 weeks ago or so, and I was talking to him about it. I was like, dude, I said, as soon as Zach hears about this, you're going to get torn apart. He's like, that's okay. I have no problem. I have no problem with that. It'll be good to get on and talk about the things that we're focusing on in what he's done. So yeah, I will let him know that you are prepared to go at him. So
I'm not yet, but I will be.
You will be.
I'm going to put in the time. No, I'm not. Hey, let me ask you this. I have noticed a real correlation between people who are celebrated as being great communicators despite not being good theologians and people who are actually not very good communicators. Like, show me... Seriously, I really think Joel Osteen is a very poor communicator. He doesn't do, like, anytime you go into a basic homiletics class, I've been through quite a few of them in that I actually went to Bible college in a pre-seminary program, and I had seminary classes on them, and you're always going to have, or for that matter, I mean, this stuff in education, if you're doing like a class on public speaking.
Right.
You're going to have forms that you rate people on different areas.
Yep.
And some things that are important are variation of volume, tone, tempo, basically using all the non-words, all the non-verbals at your disposal to help communicate the message.
Yes.
And I find someone like Joel Osteen to be very lacking in that area. It's all, basically you could write an algorithm very quickly that you punch any subject in, or any sentence rather, and it spits out exactly like Joel. I mean, there's nothing about it.
Right.
Somebody like, say, Francis Chan, who you're watching, and you're sort of edge of your seat because you don't know where this guy's going next.
Yep.
You can also go way too far to the extreme, where everything is, like the full gamut of emotion in every clause.
Right.
Where I feel like someone like Paul Washer loses me doing that. And I know a lot of people are really into him. He's a wonderful minister of the gospel, done much more for the kingdom than I have. It just doesn't connect with me.
Sure.
But like, as far as I'm concerned, there aren't many guys out there that are legitimately good communicators that we should study despite there being, and I don't think Andy Stanley is anything to write home about. I do think Rob Bell, your cousin, is an amazing communicator. Like, amazing. And I think he's much better live, sitting there in his presence, than on like a Numa video or something. But this guy, you lock in with him. And he's worth studying, even though the stuff that he's saying is heretical trash these days. But I don't know. From my point of view, Andy Stanley type guy, those guys are a dime a dozen at every like wannabe hip, overproduced, varnished church. So is it? Or was it more about kind of the approach to ministry and not the delivery of the message?
Well, it started as the delivery because it wasn't just Andy Stanley. It was Andy Stanley. It was Ferdy. It was Washer. It was Piper. I mean, he was looking at just a wide range of pastors, in their speaking forums. So it wasn't just Andy Stanley. Andy Stanley, what drew his attention was his approach to ministry. And so he started becoming more interested in that aspect of not going, and actually we just had a whole service on this, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, not going seeker sensitive, but being more open and hospitable. And that's something that our church had been lacking for a number of years since I had been there. And so it was more a process of approach to ministry and things like that. And so within that, that's kind of what, his initial study of all these different speakers is what pulled him more toward looking at Andy Stanley and, his approach to ministry and being more open to people. And again, one of the things that was of concern was that mean we're being, seeker sensitive and all that? And he's like, no, I mean, we want to make sure that, when people are coming through the door, they're greeted with a smile, that the only offense that is before them is the offense of the gospel. And so, from my standpoint, Greg has always been a great communicator. I've connected with him in his way of communicating.
Yeah, he's a great preacher. I've listened to a number of his messages. He's very good.
Yeah, and so nothing from that end is going to change. Nothing from the end of the way he preaches in terms of pulling everything back to the gospel, everything back to Christ is changing. He's said it 100 times before, and he's still saying it now that unless people understand the depravity of who they are, then the gospel isn't going to mean anything. So it's not watering down who we are as people and who God is as a Savior and living in light of that. But it's making sure that when people are coming into the doors of the church, that we as a church family are being more welcoming and open mm-hmm. to them, greeting them, and making sure that we are loving the outsider, as much as, we are each other. And so that was more his fascination. And, his thoughts are that he believes Andy Stanley's church does that very well. So I'm not going to
with a slight nuance there. Instead of the only offense being the offense of the gospel, it's the only offense is the offense to the gospel of Andy Stanley's preaching. Hey-o!
Yeah, I'm not going to stand here and try to argue on Greg's behalf. Those points and all
let's let Greg stand or fall on his own two.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to bring it up.
Yeah.
I actually also try to read more widely than I would be comfortable with. I mean, it's so easy to get in your echo chamber, just read people in your quote-unquote tribe, and not gain much out of it. Yeah. And there's an awful lot to be learned from. I mean, even from the point of view of how is Andy Stanley mobilized so many people who were super disenfranchised by the church to now be willing to listen to sermons and reassess whether or not maybe this is something they want in their life. I'm being contrary just for contrariness' sake. I've got no beef with it really.
Yeah.
But Dutcher probably won't listen to this before we record, and I am going to pretend I have one just because I want to hear him squirm. I saw the best meme today. It was a guy about 2/3 the way up a really tall extension ladder, mm-hmm. right? He's on the ladder. The ladder is leaning against the very top of a tree, and this was a photograph, and he is sawing the tree down. And it says, on the ladder it says New Testament. On the tree it says Old Testament, and on the guy it says Andy
Stanley. Oh my gosh. That's hysterical. Oh my word. Oh, too funny. Oh man.
Hey, have we gotten any milestones or anything in the discussion group? Have we hit 100? We haven't hit 100. We haven't gotten that far up, have we? The 100th person, you get something, maybe. You get a book by Andy Stanley. It's going to come signed by Greg Dutcher. It's going to arrive in the Pony Express right in your mailbox.
Oh man.
No, but if you haven't gotten on that, listener, get on it, because it is, and I say this as somebody who's on a bunch of groups, including other podcasts that I host and follow and all sorts of stuff. It's where I go first when I go on Facebook. In fact, sometimes it's the only reason I go on Facebook, because I know there's going to be interesting discussion and funny stuff going on.
Yeah, it is. It is a ton of fun to get on there and know, that no matter, where it's kind of popping up in the feed and what discussion's popping up in the feed, that it's going to be a great conversation. We have such a flow and mix of, more theological conversations, more life practical conversations, entertainment conversations with movies and things like that. And so, really is a great group, and would definitely recommend people getting on that. I also want to remind people, to hop on and, follow us on Twitter if you're not doing that, because, we do things through Twitter as well. And then leave us some love. Leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify or Podbean or Stitcher. We're up on any of those. And so, the more you leave us reviews, the higher up we go on the list and ratings, and people are able to find us easier. So, getting all the promotional things out there for everyone. So,
you know what? I feel like you've really picked up some self-promotion tips from Andy Stanley.
Actually, it's not Andy Stanley. It's another podcast I've been listening to. So this other podcast, it's a D&D podcast called Sneak Attack. And at the end of every episode, they're just reminding people to go on and, give them a review, give them a rating. And so, I want to start being more conscientious about that and reminding people.
You have time for that, but not for the Gut Check podcast, huh?
Actually,
Dude, I'm locking eyes right now with a beautiful white-tailed deer that just wandered into this parking lot. I feel really bad for it. It must be so scared.
Oh, wow. Is the area you're in, like, urban?
There are adjacent woods, but not in the direction it's sort of headed. I wonder if I should try and scare it back in the right direction. I'm going to do that. I'm going to jump off here, man, and see if I can keep this thing from running into the freeway and getting plowed over.
All right, that sounds good. And as you're hopping off, we're going to sign off. Zach, we just rocked the Casbah.
These go to 11.